Hello, everyone, and you're welcome to the Siren Podcast brought to you by DOH Africa. Today, I have another amazing guest with me, and we're going to be talking about security engineering in cloud infrastructure. Hi, Uttej.
Hello, thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I currently work as a security engineer in Silicon Valley, and I've been working across the security domains with a lot of startups, private companies, and trying to help them out with their security risk and trying to make sure the organizations are secure and they are serving customers in the right way. That's a little bit about me. I've been working a lot of the subdomains like corporate security, cloud security. Sometimes I have done incident response as well in the past. Yeah, that's a bit about me.
Amazing. Okay, so how does security engineering work in Silicon Valley?
That's a great question. There are actually two sides of security engineering in Silicon Valley. The one side is the big tech security. What I mean by that is the Amazon, Facebook, Google, those kind of really big corporations and how they handle security. And the other side is the hyper-growth startup ecosystem that is very common in Silicon Valley. Now you've been hearing tons of new AI companies coming up, whether it is Anthropic, whether it is OpenAI, those kind of companies. So what I'm trying to explain is the big tech companies, their security posture is very different. So they have the problems totally at a scale, how they can protect customer data for, let's say, 1 billion entries. And the hyper-growth startup security is more about how to actually start the security from scratch and build it up in a really secure manner. They definitely come with different challenges. So you have things there is no security hire initially and you need to hire someone and that person needs to do multiple things within the security and then slowly growing out and branching out it various security functions. So that's how things work in Silicon Valley, specifically in the security domain.
Okay, great. So, how do you build a security engineering function?
That's another great question. It totally depends on the organization you're working at. For example, if it is a financial technology company, or is it a healthcare company, or is it in an AI space? So the security function and building out security engineering completely changes depending upon the domain and the sector. So sometimes you have to see what is the security requirement and sometimes it's given. What I mean by that is, let's say you are in a fintech world and you are processing customers' financial data, whether that is their personal identifiable information or bank account details. So they will have to comply with a lot of regulations like PCI DSS or SOC 2, right? And sometimes it is depending upon what kind of a sector the company is working around. If it is in a healthcare sector, the regulations and the requirements are completely different. So first you will need to understand what kind of a sector the corporation is in and what are the kinds of customer data they are actually gathering. And once you have those answers cleared up, you will need to know what is the security risk that company is owning and how to actually protect those stuff. And there are multiple sub functions you have to build within security engineering. Few examples I can tell is most common is application security, then the other is cloud security, corporate security, and there is security operations, GRC, red teaming, and multiple sub functions you have to build out depending upon what you're trying to protect and how you want to protect it. That's in a nutshell when you have to build out a security engineering function.
I want you to walk us through the key things each security function should protect and how.
Yeah. So for example, let's pick on cloud security. So generally cloud security, what it entails is what kind of like a cloud security provider you're doing or using it. So either you're like building things on AWS or Microsoft Azure, or is it like a Google Cloud? So depending upon that, you have to build out various kind of projects. For example, let's say we have everything is on AWS. You're using EC2 instances, you're using RDS for doing databases, you're doing KMS for like key management, and you're using, let's say, Kubernetes. So within cloud security, you're pretty much focusing on whatever the stuff is in the public cloud hosted and how to like actually gate them. It's like you're securely like making sure the data is accessible for the authorized person, but also you have like security guardrails to protect from unauthorized person. And that's like a cloud security. The other thing is application security. So those are the security engineering teams. What they focus on is how the code is written, right? If someone is building a microservice, are there any threats around it? So they will be doing threat modeling in the application. They will be doing like a code scanning for package vulnerability or detecting some sort of like a wrong business logic written in the code. Also, they also run bug bounty programs, meaning like they will be using HackerOne or BugCrowd. Those are like the most common bug bounty programs, and you will have your HackerOne like application deployed there so that, let's say, a threat actor or like a security practitioner, they can actually go and try to like play with it and try to like see if they can penetrate and get into it. And that's basically the application security. They will scan the code, do the threat modeling, and figuring out tons of bug bounty programs and many more things. These are just like a key examples. Other like a security function is a corporate security. What they do is like managing identity. What I mean by identity is, let's say a corporation has like 1,000 employees. Like how 1,000 employees, how they are like, let's say, getting access to corporate resources, whether they are accessing, let's say, Google Workspace, or they're accessing their daily day-to-day SaaS applications, right? They will also implement zero trust if the access is securely given and in a least privileged manner. Those are the stuff corporate security will focus on. Obviously, there are like more things like SaaS posture management or doing data loss prevention and many other functions. And then there is another field of security is called SecOps. What they do is they focus on log ingestion. Let's say you have AWS, you have Google Workspace, you use Slack, you use multiple of these software systems, how you can actually capture logs from every single thing and ingest into your some sort of a SIM solution, like most commonly used Splunk or Sumo Logic, and building out alerts and detection on any kind of like a suspicious activities. There is also GRC function. They handle like governance, risk, and compliance. So as I mentioned previously, depending upon what kind of domain you are, you will have to comply with various regulations, and GRC is the security engineering function. They will lead the efforts on that side, making sure the corporation is complied with any of the regulations in the sector. And yeah, those are like a few key functions. There is also like a red teaming as well. So you will have a specific dedicated engineers just trying to like hack into your own organization and try to find loopholes. All these functions, they completely and drastically change based on the organization. Initially, let's say if it is like a really small scale company, they will have one or two engineers. They are doing multiple security functions. And then as the organization is actually maturing, there will be like sub teams within security. So those are the kind of like a high level information about like security functions.
Okay, fantastic. I want us to not focus majorly on cloud security. So, what are threats in cloud security, or what are some threats we should look out for in cloud security?
Yeah, that's amazing question because I've been like working on cloud security for a while now, and the threat actors, they do vary completely. So there are threat actors who are like literally focusing on, let's say, container. Some threat actors are focused on doing some sort of attacking the cloud resources directly. So the most common ones, at least in the modern era of the cloud security, is container images. And what they will try to do is manipulate a public container image with some sort of like a malicious version. And these malicious kind of like container images are just like looping around in like the public registry. So when a developer is trying to build out their microservice or application, what they generally do is like they pull out these kind of like publicly owned images and they will build the application on top of it. So unknowingly, what happens is they are like shipping out code or shipping out application which is vulnerable by default. And it's also like hard to know unless and until you have some sort of like a detection in place. That's like one very common threat in cloud security. The other one is depending upon what kind of container you are building out, and there will be like so many moving parts and packages embedded in it. And if there is any like vulnerable package, it can lead you to like maybe privilege escalation from container to host and do lateral movements. Or maybe they can scan other connected cloud resources and try to like exfiltrate data as much as possible. And this is a common way of doing like a threat and manipulative way of like cloud infrastructure is like somehow get in either through supply chain or vulnerable container image or privilege escalation, try to scan for like the data as much as possible and try to exfiltrate that data outside into somewhere else. And then they can do a lot more damage. And that's like a common threat actor in cloud security.
Okay, so are there ways to mitigate this cloud threat, cloud risk?
Yeah, there are various ways of doing this. So the common one I can see is like a concept of a blast radius. So what I mean by that is when some resource is hacked or some resource got penetrated, you want to minimize the blast radius, meaning like how big is the exposure is going to be. As long as you can mitigate that and you can contain it, that means the risk is like very minimal. There are like multiple ways to implement certain projects. For example, having a multi-count strategy is really common, and I highly recommend any security engineer to look into it and try to like implement. What I mean by that is, let's say you have a production environment and you have your lower environments like staging, pre-prod, and like testing environment. Trying to make sure all these environments are in a different AWS account and having some sort of like a guardrail between interconnectivity. So what I mean by that is, let's say you have a production account and all the production data and production resources only stay in that account. If you're doing anything like lower environment or developers are doing testing in the lower environment, they should be in like a different isolated specific AWS account, and they should not be connected to each other so that the network is not flat. And let's say someone gets in and try to like attack a testing instance in a testing environment, they can only expose themselves to testing data and they don't touch the production data or the main customer data. So having that kind of like isolation is very important. So that's like the one absolutely great advice I can give to anybody who is listening, literally looking into multi-account strategy for your cloud providers. And AWS, Azure, even GCP, they have like pretty standard ways of doing it. The other stuff I can recommend is doing container security. And as I mentioned about the threat actors in container images, it's really important to have some sort of like a secure base image. What I mean by that is if you can build out like a clean container base image in-house and give it out to your developers and they use it instead of blindly trusting some sort of like a public container image is highly recommended. And the security team can actually maintain these clean base images, update the patch, do many things, whatever the developer need for building out their applications. Maybe you have to talk to multiple developer teams and try to see what they actually use in a container image. Are they specifically looking at some package manager? Are they specifically looking at certain library? Make sure the image is like very bare bone and it's maintained in a cleaner way. The other stuff I can recommend is doing role-based access to containers. You can actually implement zero trust network access for accessing these kind of like containers. Also, you can do like secret managements with AWS KMS, or you can use Vault, which is coming from HashiCorp. There are like multiple ways of doing secret scanning and secret management as well. And you can embed all these things in your CI/CD pipeline security. So having some sort of like a container scanner or like the vulnerability scanner is really important. Using like Terrascan, TFSec for your IAC code is really good. Highly recommend. I've used it in the past. Also using some sort of like a vulnerability scanner. I think there is, as I mentioned, IAC Terra scanners. For vulnerability scanning, you can use Trivi as well, which is pretty good for scanning container images. And as long as you can embed all these things in your CI/CD pipeline, so it's visible to developers, it's also visible to like security team as well. And two other things I can think about on top of my head is like log ingestion, something like a CloudTrail logs, VPC flow logs. You can pull those logs out and send it to your, let's say, SIM. The most commonly used is like Splunk, and you can build out like alerts for any kind of like a lateral movement or public exposure to S3 buckets or public exposures to like your host machines, and build out those alerts and make sure those alerts are like actionable. And the last but not least is working on the identity. So who has access to your containers and how they're accessing it? Or who has access to your AWS resources? Is it gated with SSO? Are there any MFA applied? Do you have any standing, like a long-lasting admins? And how to like actually mitigate and protect them and move towards just-in-time access? Those are a few key points, I think, and the key projects as well to implement to mitigate tons of existing threats in the cloud security. Yeah.
Okay. Amazing key takeaways, amazing mitigating steps. Okay, for an organization that's into cloud, do you think cloud security awareness can help them prepare, or how can cloud security awareness training help them prepare their employees, or do you even think it can help them?
Yeah, I think this topic needs definitely more and more awareness, because you definitely want to get closer to the platform engineering team. Generally, it is composed of SRE team, security, or IT team. Obviously, the first target should be these teams, and then going more closer to the developers and like preaching them what are the good kind of practices in security, focusing just on the cloud. Let's say you're building out like a container, you're building out your application, what kind of like image they should use, what not to use, how to use it. Even you have to like partner with many developer teams and to understand use case as well. The security awareness, just focus on cloud security is really important. And there are so many things that can go wrong in this one, right? So a developer can have their system being hacked, or there might be some sort of insider threat as well. So those kind of like a preaching all the good practices to every single one in some sort of like a security awareness is really important. And there are various ways of like actually doing this. So sometimes you can actually internally host some sessions where you can like educate your org saying, hey, these are the good security practices, these are the bad security practices. And you can tell them like what has gone wrong in the org in the past. Or you can give them like current outside the org examples. And it's everyone's job to make sure they are secure on their own. Also, whatever they're writing and building out is also secure by default. And it's everyone's job. So I completely understand doing and preaching for like security and like educating every single one.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so you mentioned that recently you are working on cloud security, right?
That's right.
So can you share with us personal challenges you faced in your cloud security career and how you overcame them?
Yeah. One of the example I can give out from a very recent experience is doing the vulnerability management within the cloud, because you will have so many resources, whether you have EC2 instances, whether you have container images, whether you have databases and so many other things, right? And you definitely want to protect all of them. The standard way I look at those things when I'm like working every day is I try to look for what is the crown jewel and the customer data, right? And where that data is hosted, whether it is in like some S3 bucket or is it in like RDS instance or like whatever, like a database you're hosting it. Make sure you have clear understanding of where the customer data is and what are the paths to get access to the customer data. And try to see all the vulnerabilities in each and every single resource that can lead to the customer data. For example, if an EC2 instance has some sort of like a vulnerability, but it is attached to a security group, which can lead to some sort of like a database instance, trying to like focusing on that EC2 instance and trying to focusing on that security group and making sure, is this connection needed? Is this needed? And the second step is like how to like actually add multiple guardrails so that it is not easily exploitable and it's not easily accessible to the customer data. And making sure you're like trying to like patch securities as much as possible. Also building out security automation, because there will be like tons of like EC2 resources across the org, and there will be like tons of like vulnerabilities coming every day. So it's gonna be really hard to catch up with all the vulnerabilities and patching. So there has to be a secure way of building out the applications. Either you build out some sort of like automation to patch the instances as you're like building out, or you will need to figure out another project to see, are there any business use cases to expose these kind of like a data to certain resources, and try to like actually minimize and mitigate all the security risk. Yeah, that's the example I can think about from my recent example.
I like that really. Okay, what do you think are the most important skills or qualities for a cloud security professional to have, and why?
Yeah. So, see, the cloud security is generally based on a lot of the public cloud providers, and the most common used ones are like AWS, Azure. And so if someone is trying to learn about cloud security, I would highly recommend them to try to like look at existing resources from like these providers. AWS has like tons of like certifications as well. One is like a cloud practitioner, then there is like a solutions architect, and there are like more security specific certification within AWS. That will just make you aware of the things that you want to know within the AWS realm, right? What are the services there are and how each service works. And once you know how those things are like working, you need to see and try to like implement on your own. Maybe like a spin up like your own AWS account. I think you can do it for free for 1 month or so, and then try to play out with like various resources and see how you can actually attack it, or what are the guardrails you can actually apply to prevent it. And there are like other ways like try hack me, or there are like flaws.cloud. There are so many resources available online, and I will encourage people to try and play with those resources and see what are the actual security risks that you can actually think about, and just build out as many projects you can and keep on improving and brushing up on your skills. Obviously, Learning Python or some sort of automation tools is also really important, because in cloud security, you have to actually patch security loopholes, but also you want to do it for, let's say, 100 resources or 1,000 resources at scale. So that is also like a very important skill to learn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm having a great time, I won't lie. Rounding up the show, I'd like to ask one last question. How do you stay current with the latest cloud security developments and advancements?
Yeah, so it's a definitely a challenging thing to do, because you have to like constantly look at like the existing threats. So the most common thing I do it is like I keep myself updated with a lot of like resources, whether you are like reading out like beepingcomputers.com, or you're reading some sort of security threat forums. So you have to keep looking at those things, and also you have to see what are the trends that are happening, whether companies are using a specific resource or whether they are using some sort of AI tools. So the security risk is drastically going to change based on what is coming out. Try to read as many news articles and see how other corporations in your area are doing. Maybe go to some sort of like a security events and talk to like really specific security practitioners and see what are the different things they are like also like seeing from their angle. Yeah, so just to highlight or summarize the things I generally do, it is like literally check out different security forums, check out any kind of like a podcast that you can see or like you're interested into, and also like talk to other security practitioners in the similar field and similar sector for your organization. Yeah, those are the few key points I can think about.
Thank you so much, Uttej. Thank you so much. That's a wrap on today's episode of Siren Podcast. We hope you gained valuable insights into the world of security engineering and cloud infrastructure. Join us next time for more expert discussions. This is the Siren Podcast. Insights to stay ahead.